saying hello to all of our webinar attendees and to thank everyone for being part of our new webinar series, which we are calling Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month. This webinar series will focus on the evolving mobility landscape and how the transit industry is unlocking innovation, one pilot project at a time. So much happening all over the country, partnerships with TNCs, microtransit, automated shuttles, network redesign, mobility as a service, platforms, new ways of collecting fare payments. We'll take an in-depth look at all of these trailblazers that are implementing these ideas as we explore mobility innovation, one pilot at a time. Today, we're going to look at the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority's particular program, the TD Late Shift program. I'm Art Gazzetti, APTA's Vice President for Mobility Initiatives and Public Policy. My role is to kick off the webinar and to hand it over to our panel. But first, I want to tell you just a little bit about the Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month. Again, we're going to have every month a webinar on a new service delivery approach. But what distinguishes this is we're going to offer you some tangible takeaways so that you might be able to build upon this in your own community. Things like, for example, procurement templates, the contract that's used, promotional materials that are used. You might want to take the idea, import it into your own community, and build this. We're going to build on everyone's success and learn from everything else that occurs. All the documents will be available on APTA's website under the Mobility Innovation Hub. I'll talk about that in a moment. The resources available for this particular webinar, and we'll talk about them during the webinar. You'll see there's going to be the contracts, the agreements, the ridership data, et cetera, et cetera. This shows you some of the specific things you'll get from the webinar. And mark your calendars for May 7th, which will be the next webinar with Denver RTD, where you can pull up the transit trip planning and pay for your transit trip through the Uber app. That's on May 7th. And June, we invite all of you and encourage all of you to bring ideas to our attention. Please send APTA suggestions on new breakthroughs that you're seeing happening and how ideas and topics we might discuss in future webinars. Today's presenters, the conversation will be facilitated by David Zipper of DZ Strategies, working with APTA. He will be talking with Brad Miller, the CEO of Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority in St. Petersburg, Florida, and Bonnie Epstein, the senior planner at PSTA. So one more point before we get into it. We invite the audience to please think of your questions as we go. To submit a question or comment to the moderator during the session or during Q&A, please type it into the question box on your screen and then click on the send arrow located at the bottom of the box. And when I say materials will be available on the APTA website, this is what you do. You go to our homepage on our website, you click on the Resources tab, and on the Resources tab, go to the Mobility Innovation Hub, and you'll see some of the services and materials and resources you can find on the Mobility Innovation Hub. You'll see on the box on the right, Pilot of the Month. So we'll have all of these webinars streamed on that site and all the materials available electronically to you through the APTA Mobility Innovation Hub. And at that point, I'll turn it over to David Zipper.
Thanks very much, Art. It's great to be with everyone here today. For those who have not had the chance to meet yet, I am a resident fellow at the German Marshall Fund, a think tank in DC, and I write a lot about the future of mobility in cities across the country and around the world. And it's been a pleasure to work with Art and the APTA team to provide services around the future of mobility to APTA members. And I'm really excited about what we're going to be discussing today with this first webinar around Pilot of the Month, because I think what's happening in Pinellas County is just so creative and so, in many ways, inspiring, and I think could be of real interest to the transit agencies that are with all of us here today. So I want to mention one other resource that I can point you toward. If we could go to the next slide. With each of these Pilot of the Month programs that we're going to be offering, I think Art mentioned the next one's going to be about Denver RTD. With each one, there's going to be a write-up like this, which we've created for you. It's about 2 pages long that will summarize the pilot, offer those resources that Art mentioned too, that you can feel free to learn from and copy, like contracts and data tracking mechanisms. And this is really something you can share with colleagues or with peers who may not be able to join the webinar, or if you just want to get a little bit more data beyond what we're going to be able to go through in just the next 40 minutes or so. So I do encourage you to go to the Mobility Innovation Hub to see that. And I think we have that actually on the next page here. You can see that the memos available, as well as the resources too that we were just talking about. So what's going to happen now for the next 35 or 40 minutes, we've got time to learn from Brad and from Bonnie, the next slide, about what's happening at PSTA and really dive into the TD Late Shift program and lessons that have been learned from it. So they prepared some slides to share with us. I'm going to ask them some background questions and some discussion questions too about what's happened with the program thus far. And there'll be some time at the end of our webinar here to get questions from you all. So please do jot down questions as we're having a conversation. I think they can go ahead and enter them now. Is that right?
Yes.
You can go ahead and input your questions now through GoToWebinar, excuse me. And I'm looking forward to hearing what's on your mind too. But without further ado, let's dive into it. So Brad and Bonnie, thanks for being here.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, we're excited.
Great. So just to set the stage a little bit, could you tell us just a little bit about PSTA and the geography you serve? Just help us paint the picture of what happens in Pinellas County.
Sure thing. Well, thank you so much for having us on this call. Yeah, we are talking to you from beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida, which is on the west coast of Florida, where there are a lot of tourists with us right now, because this is our peak season of the year during spring break, when lots of northerners come down to sunny Florida to our beaches along Clearwater Beach and all along our Gulf Coast. We are a peninsula on that's completely surrounded by water, basically, as you can see on the map there. But yes, the picture, we do get sunsets and beautiful skies like that, and we have beautiful clear water. So everything is paradise here as far as the weather and vacations. But maybe some of the challenges we have is perhaps not so paradise as far as transportation funding goes. We have a traditional bus system that is serving our population. There's about 1 million people that live in our county. But some of the innovative programs that we've got to know about, including the one we're going to talk about today, are basically born out of the need to find different solutions outside of a normal fixed route solution, in order to be more efficient with but still provide the same kind of mobility to our customers.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the sunset is always like we saw in that first slide, and the water is always a mix of green and blue, like in this one. Is that what you're telling us, Brad?
Exactly. Now, Bonnie and I right this minute are wearing a tie and in a boring conference room, but nearby is that picture.
And I think you mentioned to me earlier, you actually have a bikini policy. Is that right? Not every transit agency does.
Oh, well, I think I said we have a wet bathing suit policy, which we have very popular tourist-oriented trolley routes that go up and down the beach, just, feet from that white sandy beach. And yeah, you're allowed to come right out of the water and right onto our transit if you have a towel and you put a towel down.
Good to know. Good to know for when, as a northerner, next time I come down, it's good to know that the invitation stands. But to dive into some of the creative sort of programs that you've done, I think that not just with even TD Late Shift, but before TD Late Shift, PSTA developed a pretty interesting and creative reputation for doing sort of innovative partnerships with ride hail or TNCs. And can you give us a little bit of a history about that? And also, what was your motivation for reaching out to the Ubers and Lyfts of the country to explore partnerships in the first place?
Yeah, thanks. If you go to the next slide, you can see our first partnership that we were very, very happy to launch back and be the first transit system to actually sign a contract with Uber back in 2016. And that service was called Direct Connect. And really the reason that we got interested in partnering with Uber was back in 2014, there was a referendum for increased transit funding in our community that did not pass. And we were looking at ways in which we could maybe provide connecting service to our main corridors, to our high capacity transit corridors, different than a typical shuttle bus, or in perhaps a lower cost, more efficient way. And connected at the same time, there was a whole debate going on in Florida at the state legislature between taxi cabs and Uber regulation that I know is going on across the country. And we were a place that some of our legislators thought we could be sort of a test bed for this. And so it was some legislators that connected me with Uber, and we launched in February of 2016 this program called Direct Connect, just in a pilot small area of our county. And that was what is now we call a first mile, last mile kind of service, where we provided a subsidy to an Uber ride to and from a major transit stop right in the middle of that shaded area that's shown on the slide. In that shaded area, you can get an Uber ride to and from one of our major transit centers right in the middle. From that beginning, we've expanded that first mile, last mile program now to the entire county, which is shown on the right-hand side. All those purple dots are different locations now that you can get a discounted Uber ride or taxi ride to and from a major either transit center or transit stop anywhere in the county. You can now get a subsidized first mile or last mile connection from neighborhoods that may not have direct service. But what I was really proud about that first program was it established our relationship with Uber. And, those were the early days, and Uber, was experimenting with us just as much as we were experimenting with them. At first, we didn't get any data whatsoever on the program, and then that has evolved substantially over time. But that really led to the program that we're going to talk more about, the TD Late Shift program, which is a little bit different. It's not a first mile, last mile, but it's a use of TNCs to fill a gap late at night when we don't have bus service running.
I see, and we'll get to TD Late Shift in just a second. But I do just want to ask one question about Direct Connect, because as you said, Brad, this idea of a first mile, last mile partnership with ride hail is something that it's compelling that you were the first ones to do it, but many other transit agencies have programs that are comparable now. Do you have any lessons learned that you would share from Direct Connect that you think could be instructive to other agencies?
Yeah, well, I think there are some lessons learned. What we found right from the get-go was we did need to do a large amount of outreach to our customers about, just the basic questions like how to use Uber. At the very beginning, Uber sent a bunch of their employees to our community once we launched it, just to show our transit riders how to download their app, and it was a pretty neat setup within the Uber app. You can see right when you come into our county and you pull up your Uber app on your phone, you can see the discount and see a PSTA option right in there. but it just took a lot more, I would say more than I thought it would, more explaining and coaching of our customers on how to use Uber. Now, maybe I was, putting my transit hat up on, maybe I was completely letting the fox into the henhouse, I don't know, but I would say that was a big lesson we learned. We actually transitioned from talking to individual customers and then started reaching out to major employers in that zone that were off the main line, and started talking through the employers to their employees on how they might be able to still ride the bus, even though they were not within walking distance of the line. They could even pile into an Uber ride together, and it'd be less than $1 to connect over to the fixed route bus where they could get where they needed to go.
That's great. All right, well, let's dive into to TD Late Shift. I think Direct Connect is a program. You were the first one to have a first mile, last mile. There's lots of others, but TD Late Shift, again, I think you were the first agency to have a program like this, and I think it remains pretty unique. Can you walk us through what the motivation was behind it and what you were trying to, the problem you're trying to solve with it?
Yeah, so I'll sort of kick off sort of how we decided to get into this. It still was kind of the same issue about how we could provide mobility to our population of, like I said, nearly a million people in different ways, in maybe more efficient ways than we were able to provide with our traditional fixed route bus service. And as you've noted, we have a very large tourist-based economy in our community, with lots of late-night jobs or third-shift jobs at all those hotels and restaurants along the beach and other places that get off late at night, that many of those rely on public transportation to get to and from work, but they often, for that late night job, they can take the bus to work, but they can't get home because the buses stop running. And we looked at different ways in which we might extend our whole fixed route network late at night, and weren't able to financially support that. And so with the relationship that we had established with a ride hail service, we thought, well, hey, maybe we can provide Uber rides or taxi rides late at night to the lowest income group in our community. In Florida, throughout Florida, there's a program that's funded by the state called the Transportation Disadvantaged Program that provides transportation disadvantaged funds to us specifically for low income individuals. And low income people therefore get a very discounted transit pass to ride our regular transit. What they can now do in our community, the folks that qualify for the low-income bus pass can now pay $9 extra instead of just $11 for their monthly pass, their bus pass. They pay $20 or $9 a month, and they get basically a free ride on Uber or a taxi home every single night of the month. It's a very, very great deal for these, and it's been very, very successful.
That's great. And if I remember right, the average price of a trip for on Uber or for United Taxi is in the order of $10 to $20 per trip. Is that right? In Pinellas County?
Yeah, it's I think I had said it's between $11 and $16, just depending on distance. So that's about an average for the county. Yeah,
that's quite a bargain. So just to be clear, it's $9 a month for up to 25 trips to or from work. Each of those would be $10 or $15 each, right?
Yes.
That's great. And so when did TD Late Shift launch?
TD Late Shift launched in August of 2016, so about 6 months after we started the first phase of our Direct Connect program.
That's great, and I think it's interesting that Uber's part of it, United Taxi is part of it. You have a paratransit provider, Care Ride, that's part of it. Why is Lyft not part of it? That might be of interest to folks on the webinar.
Well, that's a good question. We had initially asked Lyft to participate in both the first mile, last mile program and the late shift. Instead of doing a traditional procurement where we issued an RFP and then got different vendors to bid on it, we set up both these programs essentially as open solicitations. If you operate a service in Pinellas County and can meet the obligations of our contract, meaning that you can provide trips late at night, and you can meet our insurance requirements, which was very important to ensure that the insurance requirements on the TNCs were the same as those on taxis, and then you can sign up to our programs. And Lyft was actually very interested in it when we started it. It was really on the Direct Connect, the first mile, last mile program, that at the very beginning, Lyft was unable, just some technical issues. They were unable to basically geocode, to ensure that folks were only going to and from a specific bus stop in our different zones. And their app just works a little bit differently. So we started off just with Uber, and then when we launched TD Late Shift, we just maintained that relationship with Uber. But now we have a third program that we've launched subsequently on using TNCs for paratransit, and there we're partnering with Lyft as well.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think it'd be great to hear how the program went and some lessons learned from it. But before we do that, I think you have a video for us, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we do.
Video of testimonials. Let's show it.
My name is Jordan Metz. I work at NGR, and I'm also a full-time student.
My name is Jamel Williams, and the program is important to me because it helps me be closer with my family.
My name is Heather Stuckrat, and the program is important to me because it has allowed me to become a full-time employee, making more money for my family, giving me a safe way home at night.
It gets me home safe, secure to my children. I used to get home almost an hour and a half later than scheduled. If I got off at 9 o'clock, I wouldn't get home till 11, so I have to walk long blocks. Long blocks late out on the south side of St. Pete. Very dangerous.
The TD Late Shift program is important to me because it helps me work a longer shift and be able to work later hours and be able to get home earlier so I can get more sleep to make it to school on time in the morning.
Now that I'm full-time, my family has medical benefits.
It's Christmas time, so it's definitely going to play a major role in the Christmas Avenue, being able to buy some more toys and stuff like that.
Now with that extra money, I'm able to buy more stuff for my daughter and buy more stuff for my household with the money I saved.
So it's very important that we are able to get around town, and this program makes it possible.
Just thank you very much for allowing that to happen.
It's a powerful short video of testimonials, and for those who may want to see it again or show it to others, it is available on the Mobility Innovation Hub through one of the links that PSTA has been kind enough to provide to APTA. So thanks for sharing that to Bonnie and Brad.
Yeah.
Beyond those personal stories, can you spend a couple minutes and walk us through some of the results from TD Late Shift at this point after, I guess, about 2.5 years of running the program?
Yeah, for sure. So as part of the program, we give out a rider survey. So when riders come in, like Brad mentioned before, and purchase their bus pass and pay the copay for the TD Late Shift program of $9, we give riders a survey. And we've been able to see that, great results coming in from that survey that just echo some of the sentiments that we heard in the video, that not only are riders able to get new jobs, but they're able to take on more shifts that they weren't able to get before. And it's not just related to work, it's also the time savings of not needing to wait for someone to pick them up after their shift or walk home or ride their bike, so they have more time to sleep or see their family, just spend time doing other things. there's also been a really big safety impact that, you know, I think riders are able to now be able to wait inside. If they're using the Uber app, they can track the car coming to get them, and they don't have to walk home. They don't have to bike home. And what's great about this program is that it's very reliable, that once riders are in, they know that they can count on this program to get them to work, get them on time, and then for those using it to come home early in the morning, that they know they can count on it, that they don't have to walk home in the dark or bike or anything like that. So riders are very satisfied with this program, and I think it's just been a really good experience both for the riders and for us.
How many people are using it per month on average, Bonnie?
So we see a lot of fluctuation in the usage of the program, and that's mostly dependent on funding that we get, like Brad mentioned, from the CTD. Right now, we have between 100 and 200 people in the program. It's about 160 right now. In the past, we've had much higher ridership than that, but we've had to close the program to new riders for a few months. We were doing a lot more trips than we could afford, but now the program is back open to new riders. We've always had the same riders in the program. And one other thing I'd like to mention is that once somebody joins the TD Late Shift program, it's not really like they're in the program for the rest of their career. Lots of people will join the program and then have to work the night shift, but then after a while they transfer to the day shift, and so then they don't have to use TD Late Shift anymore, or they get a better job, or maybe they're able to afford a car after saving up for a while. So we see people cycle through the program pretty frequently.
And just, you use an abbreviation CTD as the funding source for people on the webinar. What does that stand for?
So that's the Center for Transportation Disadvantaged. They provide this mobility enhancement grant every year, and that's what we've been using for the funding for this program.
Okay, and back to the number of people that are using it. You mentioned you had to close down the program briefly, or at least not close it down, I shouldn't say, but to not allow new people to register for it due to funding constraints. Is there, from what you can tell, is there excess demand? Would more people want to sign up and use it if there is funding available, or do you have a sense of how many people would like to join?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Basically, the details of our grant agreement with the state, we can see when too many people are taking trips, because we're paying for these late night taxi and Uber rides, and we'll basically set up a waiting list. We say, well, right now we can't take any new folks onto the program, but we'll put you on the waiting list. And then, like Bonnie said, now we've opened it back up, and so the ridership will go up. The folks will sign up, and the ridership will increase. We think there is very high demand for it. Like I think the slide says, maybe we've had over 200 on some nights. Of 200 different people are taking a ride home late at night. So who knows what if we had no restrictions on the program, what the demand would be, but we think it's a very, very popular program.
Yeah, I think right now we do have some people that have been calling in, wanting to join, possibly hearing about this program from coworkers, and so we've opened it up without advertising it to other businesses and trying to bring people in. If we had more funding, we could definitely publicize the program like we used to when we first started it, and we could really bring in a lot more users.
That's great. So I'm just going to have a couple more questions because I want to make sure there's time for participants to weigh in. And so let me ask you, first of all, are you getting the data that you need from Uber and from the other providers to be able to manage the program? And are there any lessons you would offer about data or getting data that's necessary from TNCs to other transit agencies that are on the call?
Yeah, so I think for the TD Late Shift program, we're using Uber for Business platform. And initially when we started the program, we were able to see some data, but most importantly, we were missing origin and destination. And within the platform, we're able to have some control over what we allow riders to do. So we've set it that you can only take trips between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And over time, we've been able to get more controls within this platform. So one thing we didn't have at the start was restricting riders to only 25 rides per month. So that was something we sort of had to manage ourselves. Now that's control we have within the platform, and something we don't have to worry about. And as of October 2018, October last year, we've been able to see origin and destination information. And that's been really important to make sure that the program is working the way that it should, that everyone, using this for work. And we're able to see a lot more just how people are using it. Where are they going to? What neighborhoods are they coming from? And I think right now the data that we get from Uber is pretty much all that we need within the Uber for Business platform. On the taxi side, we're able to see mostly the same information. So this program, we're getting most of the data that we would like to have.
Yeah, and I would say, it's a complete change from the beginning, from early in 2016 when we got nothing. Now we, Uber has established a transit partnership division within their company, and we are getting all the data that we need. It was interesting. I remember in the beginning of the TD Late Shift program, the riders, maybe didn't know so much about Uber. And so the majority of trips when we started, the vast majority were actually taken on taxis and very few on Uber. But then, over the last 2 years that we've been running the program, it's really shifted so that many more people are comfortable with TNCs in general. And that's been a benefit because many of the trips are slightly lower cost on Uber, and we're able to track that compared to taxis. So that's been kind of interesting data to track as well.
That's great. So just my last question, and we'll take questions from participants in the webinar, it's a pretty straightforward one. There's lots of transit agencies on the webinar right now. Would you recommend that they explored adopting a program like this? And if so, what's one or maybe two lessons you've learned that you hope they would take to heart?
Yeah, so I would really recommend this type of program because we're able to serve so many riders at a time, where we're not able to operate the fixed route system. So on the right-hand side, I've done a little analysis to see how would we tackle this problem if we were trying to use our fixed route network. And you can see that the cost per year is a little over $8 million a year, running just sort of our bare bones core routes at once an hour between 10 and 6, compared with the average yearly cost of just over $600,000 with the TD Late Shift model. What I really like about TD Late Shift is that we're leveraging the existing capacity. We're not trying to solve this problem ourselves. It's the Ubers and the taxis that are already out overnight, looking to take trips. We're leveraging the partnerships we've made with those companies to be able to do these rides at a reasonable cost per trip. And the wait time for riders is a really big thing, that when you can count on getting a ride within 10 minutes of requesting it. I think that's a really powerful thing, that whenever you get off of work or you're ready for work, you can have that ride available right then. You don't need to wait an hour for a bus or schedule the ride 2 days before or anything like that. It's an on-demand program. And I think your other question of what are some lessons learned or things we would recommend? I think Brad already mentioned the data piece. I think on the APTA website for this program that we have an amendment that with Uber that when I mentioned the origin and destination information, that amendment allowed us to see those details in the Uber for Business platform was a huge win for PSTA being able to manage this program. And I think getting all internal staff on board and understanding the program, being able to understand Uber, like Brad also mentioned, was really important.
Yep, that amendment is, I know, on the APTA website. Let's jump into the next slide. Go ahead. One more slide. Yeah, so now let's take audience questions. I know some of you have already been entering them into the question box on the GoToWebinar screen, and I'm going to ask Art Gazzetti, who's in the room with me, to pose some of those questions that have been coming through. Art?
Yes, I'm going to sort of bundle them together. And the first one is about the sort of the use of the service. Is there a distance maximum? Bonnie, you talked about it's restricted to 25 rides a month. Is there a distance maximum for the on-demand ride? That's first. I'd also bundle that with who actually books the trip. Does the customer book directly, or do you go through a call center?
So for the trip part, if a rider, riders have an option of which provider they go with. If they choose Uber, they join our sort of Uber for Business on their phone, so they link that to their Uber app, and so they're able to take trips on our Uber for Business platform directly through the Uber app on their phone. If they don't have a smartphone or prefer the taxi, then they call the taxi directly to reserve the trip.
Yeah, so it's not dispatch. They use their own Uber app. Once they're signed up for the program, they use their own Uber app, or they call the taxi directly.
Yeah, and there's no maximum distance that one can travel on the program. We just cap it to our service area of Pinellas County. So if you happen to get a job super far away out in the middle of nowhere, this program may not, be the right choice for you. But if it's within our service area of Pinellas County, you can go from the bottom to the top, whatever, as long as you remain in the county.
And Bonnie, that actually ties in with why the origin and destination information was so important from Uber, right? Because you want to make sure that people aren't using the program to go either from or to a destination outside your service area.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next question. Was there consideration to, what went into the consideration to use multiple vendors rather than one? And might you want to use even more than two on that? And also, what happened to the Uber price? Was it affected by the PSTA agreement on the $5?
No. The reason that we decided to go with the procurement process ourselves is, we launched the pilot, and we wanted to come up with a way that we could invite taxi companies and the TNCs together and keep it kind of as an even playing field. So we kind of came up with this open concept where we would take all comers who would be willing to sign our contract, meet our parameters of the program, meet the insurance requirements. So yes, we're open right now. If another taxi company wants to join our program, or if, hopefully we'll get Lyft to join our program soon as well. So it's really, it's open to that.
Yeah, and I think that because this program operates overnight where, maybe there aren't as many TNCs and taxis out there, the more that we can get onto the platform, the lower the wait time for the rider.
And I do want to zero in on the second question that Art asked. To be clear, this is a question about pricing. I think the person who asked the question about $5 is probably thinking of Direct Connect.
Mm-hmm.
Because with TD Late Shift, if I'm not mistaken, the person who's taking the ride is going to pay the normal Uber fare, correct?
No, so actually PSTA is covering the full fare for riders in the program. So you get up to 25 trips per month as long as it stays within the county. PSTA covers the cost. We are paying the full rate on both the taxi and Uber. There's no, we don't receive a discount, so we're paying the riders full fare. The rider only pays the $9 copay each month for the up to 25 trips.
Sorry, Bonnie, I wasn't clear. But the fare that PSTA is paying in this case, is that the normal Uber fare, or is it all adjusted from what somebody who's not part of TD Late Shift would be paying to get from one destination, an origin to a destination late at night?
It's just the normal Uber fare. So if, you know, someone that wasn't in TD Late Shift is wanting to go from their home to a bar on Clearwater Beach and it was $20, that would be the same price that we would pay as TD Late, you know, who we're doing the TD Late Shift program.
And while Art's looking for the next question, I'm just going to ask one follow-up on that, because I've heard transit agencies exploring partnerships with TNCs ask this, which is there a way of validating that Uber is not increasing the price they're charging you for the trip someone takes on TD Late Shift vis-a-vis someone who takes the exact same trip who's not on TD Late Shift and is paying Uber directly?
Well, yeah, so I've sort of verified this myself that, you know, as a TNC user, I use Uber sometimes after 10 o'clock, and I can see the cost of the trip going wherever I'm going in Pinellas County, and all it would be is switching over to a different payment method. So the UberX price is the UberX price, whether I'm paying with my credit card or if I use the TD Late Shift payment method.
Yeah, that's sort of one of the advantages of the technology that the TNCs provide is it's very easy to audit that, what you asked, David. I mean, you can see right on the Uber app, and you can see, you can get their information very directly on what the price they're charging me or our TD Late Shift customers.
Great, I think that's an important point. Thanks, guys. Art, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. Another, probably our last question, and it involves budget. Is there a way that we can, you know, chat about productivity versus this TD Late Shift versus a fixed route type service? Have you curtailed service that's perhaps resulted in some savings? Anything there? The funding to support this, operating funds in particular, local or federal? And the final question I'll weave into that, is there a cap on the number of daily rides that, you know, just from a budget point of view, you can only perhaps go so high, so do you cap the overall number? All those budget related questions.
Yeah, those are good questions. So on the first mile, last mile program, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, yes, we did discontinue one of our very low productive, very expensive, but very low ridership sort of neighborhood circulators that operated in the zone and replaced it with the first mile, last mile partnership with Uber and taxi called Direct Connect. For the late night program, overall, it is obviously a lot less expensive for us to pay for these Uber and taxi rides, even though I think the last slide showed that we have spent to date more than $600,000 on these rides. That compares to an estimate of $8 million if we were to run our regular, a base level of regular fixed route service. So we sort of have compared those. As far as the funding that we're using we're basically funding the first mile, last mile program just with our own local funding sources. But for the TD Late Shift overnight program, we are funding it with, thanks to a state of Florida a grant.
Just a final point, is there a limit on the number of trips you can do? Do you reach a budget cap on that?
So riders get 25 rides per month. We try to make sure they're only taking up to 2 rides per night, the idea being that a rider is taking the service either to work or home from work. We've learned though that through the program, talking with riders, that some shifts are less, 4, 5, or 6 hours, and they may need a ride for both legs of the trip overnight. But so it's, pretty much capped at up to 2 rides per night, 25 trips per month for each user.
But that's per rider, but if it gets more and more popular, will you be able to absorb all the additional riders and the cost that comes with that?
Oh, well, no. I mean, it comes to a point, I think, at about 175 to 200 riders. Once we hit that per night, we have had to cap with our existing funding stream, we've had to suspend new applicants from joining the program at the beginning of the month, and then they're kind of put on a waiting list until it's kind of managed the demand.
Yeah, we see that about the average rider doesn't take the full 25 trips per month. It varies anywhere from 10 to 14 rides on average that each user will actually use per month.
Okay. I think that's going to bring us to a close on time. So, I want to thank Bonnie and Brad for joining us for the conversation. And I'm going to turn things over to Art to close things out. But I'll just say it's been a pleasure being with you. And as a person who's involved with sort of shepherding these Powder of the Months together, please do give feedback on the webinar and on topics you'd like to hear about. We'd love to learn what's on your mind with them. And Art, over to you.
Only to say, mark May 7th on your calendars, please. Also, on this webinar, you can watch it again and share it with others, because we will post it on the APTA Mobility Innovation Hub. And finally, just another reminder, please give us your suggestions as to future topics that might be of interest, either something in your community or something you know going on somewhere else. Thank you all for your participation. See you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.